Ever heard the saying, history doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes? Well, today we're diving into a story that echoes through the ages, a tale of refugees, a strained empire, and a battle that changed the world forever. This is the story of the Battle of Adrianople, fought in the year 378 AD. Picture this, the late 4th century. The Roman Empire, a behemoth that had dominated the known world for centuries, was showing cracks. It was split into halves, the West and the East, each ruled by its own emperor. In the East, the emperor was a man named Valens. He was a capable administrator, a devout Christian, but he was about to face a crisis of unprecedented scale. Far to the north, beyond the mighty Danube River, a storm was brewing. A terrifying new people, the Huns, were sweeping across the plains from Central Asia. They were fierce, nomadic warriors who seemed unstoppable, driving other tribes and peoples before them in a wave of terror and displacement. The empire constantly needed more soldiers to man its vast borders, and more farmers to work its lands. In a tense standoff, they managed to talk their way out of the city, rejoining their people with a new, fiery resolve. The time for diplomacy was over. Fritigern, now burning with a desire for revenge, declared war. The Goths, who had come seeking refuge, now began to plunder the very lands they had hoped to settle. They rampaged through the province of Thrace, looting farms, burning villas, and creating a path of destruction. And to make matters worse, the other Gothic group, the Greuthungi, who Valens had forbidden from crossing, seized the opportunity of the chaos and crossed the Danube anyway, joining Fritigern's forces. The Roman problem had just doubled in size. Emperor Valens, who was in Antioch dealing with a war against the Persian Empire, was furious when he heard the news. He quickly made peace with the Persians and marched his elite field army west to deal with the Gothic uprising himself. He was confident, perhaps overconfident. He saw this as a chance to crush the barbarians and win a glorious military victory. His nephew, Gratian, the Emperor of the West, was also marching to help, having just won a significant victory against another Germanic tribe. He urged Valens to wait for his reinforcements so they could face the Goths with their combined strength. But Valens was in a hurry. His spies reported that the Gothic force was only about 10,000 strong. This was a gross underestimation. He was also jealous of his young nephew's recent success and wanted a victory all his own. The political pressure was immense. Waiting for Gratian might mean sharing the glory. So, on the hot morning of August 9, 378, near the city of Adrianople, Valens decided to attack. The Roman army marched for 8 miles under the scorching summer sun, arriving at the Gothic camp tired and thirsty. The Goths had formed a defensive circle with their wagons, a tactic known as a logger. Inside this mobile fortress were their families and all their possessions. The Gothic infantry stood ready, protecting the circle. Fritigern, a clever strategist, played for time. He sent envoys to Valens, pretending to negotiate peace. This had two purposes. First, it made the Roman soldiers wait even longer under the relentless sun, draining their energy. Second, and more importantly, it bought time for his cavalry, which was away foraging for food, to return to the battlefield. Valens, still believing he outnumbered the enemy, eventually lost patience. Some of his units, without clear orders, began to skirmish with the Gothic line, and the battle began in earnest. The Roman left wing, consisting of cavalry, actually managed to push forward and reach the wagon circle. But they were fighting unsupported, and the Gothic defenders held them back. And then, just as the battle was heating up, a cloud of dust appeared on the horizon. It was the Gothic cavalry, led by Alaloys and Saphrax, returning at full speed. They didn't just return, they crashed into the Roman flank like a thunderbolt that descends from the high mountains. As one ancient historian wrote, the Roman cavalry on the left wing, already engaged and now hit from the side, shattered and fled. This exposed the Roman infantry's flank. The Gothic horsemen, along with infantry pouring out from the wagon circle, now enveloped the Roman legions. For the Roman legionary, this was the ultimate nightmare. They were trained to fight in formation, disciplined and coordinated. But now, they were surrounded, packed so tightly together they could barely lift their arms to swing their swords or raise their shields. The Gothic warriors, armed with spears and long swords, pressed in from all sides. The Roman lines collapsed. It was no longer a battle. It was a slaughter. The elite legions of the Eastern Roman Empire were annihilated. 2/3 of the army lay dead on the field, including 35 of Valens' highest-ranking commanders. It was a catastrophe on a scale the Romans hadn't seen since the Battle of Cannae against Hannibal, over 500 years earlier. And what about Emperor Valens? His fate is a mystery. No one knows for sure what happened to him. One story says he was struck by an arrow and died fighting among his men. Another, more dramatic account, claims he was wounded and carried to a nearby farmhouse. The Goths, unaware the emperor was inside, surrounded the house and, unable to break in, set it on fire, burning everyone inside alive. Either way, the emperor of the East was gone. The Battle of Adrianople was more than just a military defeat. It was a psychological earthquake. It shattered the myth of Roman invincibility. For centuries, the Roman legions had been the symbol of order and power. Now, a barbarian army had not just defeated them, but utterly destroyed an emperor and his entire field army. In the aftermath, the Goths were the masters of the Balkans, free to roam and plunder. The new emperor, Theodosius, a skilled general and diplomat, eventually managed to sign a treaty with them in 382. But this wasn't a treaty of surrender. It was a settlement. The Goths were allowed to live within the empire, in their own territory, under their own leaders, but obligated to fight for Rome as allies. This was a radical departure from previous Roman policy. They were a nation within a nation. This set a powerful precedent. The Battle of Adrianople demonstrated that the empire was vulnerable, and that it could be forced to accommodate large groups of barbarians on their own terms. It accelerated a process that was already underway, the barbarization of the Roman army, and the carving out of autonomous barbarian kingdoms on Roman soil. Within a generation, another Gothic leader named Alaric, who may have even fought at Adrianople as a young man, would lead his people on a campaign that culminated in the unthinkable, the sack of Rome in 410 AD.